What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My guest for today is a three-time Impact World Tag Team Champion, former X Division Champion, and the current Impact World Champion, Alex Shelley. Alex, first of all, thank you so much for hopping onto the channel and taking the time to do this interview. How does it feel to hear the words Impact World Champion right before your name?
Still a little surreal, right? Like still getting used to that part.
I can't, it's funny because like you think about just like everything that you've been able to accomplish in Impact Wrestling and now to officially have the Impact World Champion title for you, just like soaking that all in. Have you even been able to manage that yet?
No, I've been too busy. So I wrestled on Friday, won the belt, wrestled again on Saturday, wrestled again on Sunday, got home Monday, and then last Friday I was in New York. Saturday I was in Dayton. Sunday I was in LA. Yesterday I got home. So busy, too busy.
It's just been like nonstop, right? Just like keep going, no time to actually sit back and reflect. So, you mentioned that you haven't been able to really kind of soak it all in just yet. So let's talk about this because here's the thing, like this is the company that gave you your first major break. When you think about when people talk about your career, you we're obviously talking about your time in Impact Wrestling amongst other things that you've done, but this is a huge part of it. And so to get to become champion in the company that gave you your break, does that feel differently for you?
Uh, I mean, I have no other world championship wins to compare it to, right? Um, in the sense that I got to win it in front of friends and family as opposed to coworkers, which is what I would consider a lot of the people at Impact. It was really, really special. And again, these are people who have seen me since the age of 18 and they've seen me develop in and outside of the wrestling business. Um, to have all these shared experience with them and for them to be there for a lot of milestones, um, this one included, was really, really special. That was really cool. And the Impact locker room, I've said this before, but I think it's probably the most cohesive locker room that I've been in my 20 years in wrestling.
Wow. Was there ever a moment where you thought that maybe it just wasn't going to happen?
Oh yeah, of course. I don't ever believe anything until it happens, right? Like that goes for life and pro wrestling. But when it happens, now it's real. Until that point, it's like worrying about something or enjoying something that doesn't exist.
And you've had all of these accolades in your career, but clearly as a wrestler, you want to get to the very mountaintop, and the very mountaintop is always being the world champion in whatever company that you're in. So, I'm curious, throughout your entire career, did you ever feel like maybe that was something that was just missing? Did you feel like, okay, well, I've done all these other things, so I don't necessarily feel like I need to become champion? What was your mentality when it came to that?
I think I start to develop a perspective where if you put something in front of me, I'm going to do my absolute best with whatever that is, right? Like, okay, we entered you into this pie eating contest. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to get really good at eating pie. So it became a situation where I just wasn't in the conversation or I wasn't in the arena to even be a world champion because, hey, the machine guns are challenging whomever next, or you are going to New Japan to compete in the best of the Super Juniors, or we are working with CMLL and we want you to participate in the Torneo Cibernetico. It was just something that wasn't in front of me until it was. And when it was, now it's like, wow, this could actually happen. This could be a thing.
It's almost like you get sort of caught up in everything that you're doing, that you're like, oh yeah, I'll eventually get to that, eventually get to that, but you're taking every step and everything that's presented to you.
Right. Right. And it's like, how much control do you really have over it? Not that much in terms of those things. You only have control over your execution of it. So I didn't devote any energy to, oh, well, man, it'd be great to be a world champion. Like, yeah, if that happens, if I get the chance, of course it would be awesome. And of course, I'm going to do my best to make that happen. But until that situation actually became something that was feasible and possible, I didn't really think I would ever be world champion.
Wow. And like the reactions too from the fans, I think the second that it happened, everybody was like, oh my God, they actually did it. Alex Shelley's finally getting his moment. And so for you, like, what was the feedback from like the fans, people that just everybody in general?
Yeah, I think it was a bit surprising for a lot of people, right? Like a lot of people were surprised, but then they weren't too. Or maybe they thought, gosh, I thought Macklin might have the belt a little longer, but wow, yeah, Shelley's obviously somebody who can be world champion. So in that way, shape, form, it was definitely interesting to hear how people viewed it through their lens. As far as the actual reactions from my coworkers and a lot of people that I'm close with in the industry, and mind you, wrestling is an industry where you'll be very close with people for like a pretty short amount of time, but then you won't see them again for years. However, if you were truly close with them in the first place, you pick up right where you left off. So I got so many messages that were really, really heartfelt, meant a lot to me. Saying congratulations and this is long overdue and so on and so forth. And whether or not it was long overdue or not, I just appreciate the fact that they actually still keep up with me. These are people, men and women with families and their own jobs, and they've got busy schedules. So it was really, really heartrending for me to read all the feedback and be told congratulations or great job from anybody.
You know what was really touching on top of everything, like seeing you celebrate afterwards, but there was a moment where commentary mentioned the face of a generation is now the face of Impact Wrestling. To hear those, like to hear that in that moment, I mean, there's so much that goes into that. You've heard, you more than anybody know how much influence you've had amongst so many wrestlers that have come about. And so to have that moment and to hear those words, how did that feel?
I didn't know they said that until you told me.
Oh, really? Oh, so you haven't watched it back yet?
You want to know something? I don't watch my. I haven't
Really?
my matches since the Machine Guns wrestled the Young Bucks in 2010. Yep. So
Wow.
again, and this speaks to my personality type, and it's not that has nothing to do with like loving or disliking wrestling, but once it's done, it's done, right? Like to me, it's like, okay, well, I know if it was a good match or not, or I know if I perform well, or I know what I could have done better. And of course, you get feedback from your peers, you get feedback from people you trust in the industry. I value that way more than I do watching myself, because I think the way I think, I'd rather have their thoughts and perspective on it, right? So I haven't seen any of my matches for well over a decade. Now with social media, of course, you'll see like clips, right? Like little bits of it. But no, I didn't know they said that on commentary, and that's actually really really cool and kind of like makes me a little flush and maybe a little bit of that. The only reason I know I'm an influence to anybody is because they tell me. And they're very forthright about it, which is very appreciative. But they'll flat out tell me. It it's cool to be viewed that way. Like this is the first I've heard of that situation as far as that being broadcast, and that's really really nice to hear. Actually, I'm gonna tear up. I'm
No,
sorry.
and it's funny because I would have thought that you knew because when I was watching the match and everything, and then just seeing you have that moment afterwards, and then hearing commentary say that, I'm like, man, they nailed it right on the head there with that. And I think people kind of like like the people that heard that kind of got like, man, that was the perfect thing to say in that moment because, and you mentioned right now, people going up to you and just outright saying that they have been inspired with your work. Not a lot of people get that. So for you to be like the guy that a lot of people go on and say, not only did this person go out and influence that person, but this person influenced me. Does that ever get old to hear for you?
No, 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 never. But again, like I take it with a grain of salt because it's like, oh wow, usually if somebody says that to me, my response is, "Thanks for watching my matches. Like now you can stop. Like go watch somebody else. Go watch somebody better, right? Like there's got to be some Kiji Muto matches out there that you haven't seen. But it is really cool for them to just give me that energy and just appreciate me that way too. And I appreciate them. As far as a lot of the younger wrestlers go, there's a handful in Impact. There's a handful in GCW, AEW, all these independents that I work for that come to me for advice. And it's symbiotic, honestly. Like I love helping them, but they help me just as much, whether they know it or not. And again, it's perspective and it's seeing how they do things. And it's more so, we call it an art collective, or that's what some of my students were calling it for a little while. But it's like you just kind of coagulate, right? Like everybody kind of pitches in their ideas. And when I coach, and I think I'm a pretty damn good coach, that comes from working in patient care for 4 years, but it's because I never tell people they're wrong because they're not wrong. And the only wrong way to do something is if it hurts you or hurts somebody else. But ultimately, I respect everybody's viewpoints. Like, let's grow together, right? Because this is art as much as it is sport and violence.
It definitely is, and you're right in that, and just, like, even hearing you talk about this, I'm like, "Yes, this makes a lot of sense in
Yeah.
everything that you're saying," and, that's the thing too that I wanna get at because you came back to Impact Wrestling, you kinda were, like, in and out, and then, back in 2020, and then you kinda went out for a bit and then came back, but did you ever think, like, here at this point in time that you would be here right now, Impact World Champion, to be able to have this moment?
Oh, no, definitely not. When I came back after getting vaccinated, which I had to do because I was working with very, very sick people, right? In the healthcare industry, that would have been in September 2021. And I had to start from the ground up. I started on independence again. And I didn't really think about where it was going to go necessarily because, let's be honest, like the pandemic was weird. It kind of flipped everything around. Um, but I loved wrestling so much and I felt so grateful that I was still able to do it that I thought the best way to go about it at this point in my life is to enjoy it. Just enjoy the process and just wrestle your heart out and appreciate the fact that, like, hey, man, this was taken away for a little bit via, again, a global pandemic. So, what are you going to do if it goes away again? And if you didn't appreciate it all along, if you started to treat it like it wasn't something special or something that you chose to do because you loved it, then you're really going to be upset with yourself. So I really tried to take that mindset going forward. And I think it paid off. It eventually you just kind of worked your way up, 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 up. And you do good work and you respect people and they respect you and you try and connect and help other people and slowly you get more and more opportunities, right? It's how life.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
So now your name is being added to this lineage of former world champions. So with that being said, what is this vision that you have of yourself? What is your vision of Alex Shelley as Impact World Champion?
Yeah, that's tough. I'm not good at talking about myself. I'm not good at like looking at myself from a third party perspective, right? Um, Somebody asked me, "What is your goal as champion?" And I really was at a loss for words, but I think what I settled on, and I'll say it again, is I don't necessarily look at it as my title reign. I look at it as a title reign for an entire generation of people that I represented and who helped me get to this point. And ultimately, whatever comes of it, my reign and my time in Impact Wrestling going forward, I want to make sure that the company is better off than when I came into it or when I came back to it about a year and a half ago. And if people can say, man, this is something that he did for us or he did for this company that made it better in the long run, then mission accomplished. I'll be happy with that.
Nice. Oh man, that's incredible. So my last question for you is because I do want to touch on Slammiversary July 15th. Talk to us about what we can expect. Obviously, you and Nick Aldis. I'm very excited for that. Tell us about it.
Right. So I was there when Nick was originally signed to TNA, and Nick came in with quite a bit of fanfare. Um, I think in many people's minds, Nick is probably the prototype professional wrestler. He dresses like what you would consider a world champion to be. He's built and looks like what most people would want their world champion to be. And I can't help but think that I'm the complete antithesis of all of it. I am completely different and on the other end of the spectrum. I mean, up until 3 months ago, I was working 40 hours a week. Now, granted, that was by choice, but I was still doing it. I was this working class hero in pro wrestling. And Nick came up the way he did and got attention from a very young age. Well, I came up on the independents and I came up driving many, many hours for very little money for a long time. And I was raised by a generation of guys who have gone on to carve legacies in pro wrestling, guys like CM Punk and, Colt Cabana Hero. Those were my mentors coming up. I was also touched by the guys who I grew up watching. So I was trained by Sabu, and Kevin Nash took me under his wing, and Mick Foley took me under his wing. And I feel like I've got all these tools at my disposal that Nick never had a chance to acquire. And that's neither here nor there. It's just my unique experience versus his. So it's interesting to me to have this type of styles clash that has really nothing to do with the mechanics of pro wrestling, just who we are. Competing in Windsor, where I was raised more or less in the wrestling industry, it's again like quite surreal to me, and it's quite sublime. But I think when it comes down to it, and again, I've said this before, but nobody wants to lose the world title in their first defense. Like nobody wants that stigma. Nobody wants that stain or reputation on them. So I got to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to watch Slammiversary. Can't wait to see that match. Alex, I want to thank you so much once again for taking the time to come on here and chat with us. To everybody watching, thank you so much. I'm Denise Salcedo. This is the Impact World Champion, Alex Shelley, and we'll catch you on the next one.